Michigan beats Minnesota by the same score that they beat USC last week. Game went very similar in terms of a second half collapse, but a lot of you are being very undued right now. The sky is not falling. I'm not saying that the sky is blue, but sometimes it's overcast, sometimes it's partly cloudy. Kind of depends on a lot of different things. Let's talk about the win. Let's talk about the trajectory of Michigan football on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We're back and doing it later than I wanted to. We'll explain that later. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Wearing glasses if you're watching. I'll explain that later. Has to do partially with the other stuff. Anyway, let's get into talking about what happened in the game. Now, Michigan's offense continues to be inept in a lot of ways. I thought it took several steps forward without the explosive plays. So you can make of that what you will. I forgot to pull up one thing. We're going to pull that up now that I wanted to kind of address. But still kind of the same exact thing. First half, Michigan not necessarily doing everything it needs to do, but drives the field early, getting some more of the downfield passing going. It became a barn burner through the passing game, full-on air raid offense. Not really, but Alex Orji triples the amount of yardage that he had from earlier, his first start and his second start, but still not much doing there. No Samaj Morgan, lots of injuries. I mean, we just got a lot of stuff that's going on here with the Michigan offense. But nonetheless, they got the win, even though they squandered a 24-3 lead in the fourth quarter. Minnesota goes tempo. All respect given to Michigan by PJ Fleck. It didn't sound as effusive as it did at this time last year when Minnesota and Michigan played, but he certainly, the way he talked about Michigan was kind of similar of like, this is a contender. This is a team that has a lot that you have to prepare for that you just kind of can't prepare for defensively and all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, I mean, Michigan still found a way to get things done, but the meltdown is in full progress. So I'm going to start kind of backwards and go to the front, basically. We're going to start now and then go back to the game. First thing I would implore you to do, if you are a Michigan fan, especially if you're one that's melting down, that's calling for Sharon he's coaching for his job right now. He needs to fire all the coordinators, all of that stuff. Number one, relax, have some patience. And instead of how I normally say you're a fan, you can take things, look forward, all that stuff, because that's the benefit and beauty of fandom compared to the coaches. Because we used to always get those messages of, it's one game at a time. Why are you talking about Ohio State? Hey, we can look at whatever we want to. We don't have to necessarily be held by the same strictures as to what they are. But what I would urge you to do if you're a fan at this point, because this is really how it's going to go for this particular season, because they didn't come out of the gates swinging and being amazing, but they're still finding ways to win, which is the most important thing. The most important thing is that W in the that notch in the win column. I would urge you to take a look at Michigan and say, we're going to look at things on a week by week basis. Did they win? Okay, good. Stop taking a look at Michigan and saying, does this translate to the final game of the season? Because they're not there yet. And as much as you might want them to be there yet, they're not. And you're just going to have to live and die by that. They can will themselves to be in a much better position at the end of the season than they look like they are going to be right now. ESPN's matchup predictor has Michigan basically going 7-5 this year. That is certainly on the table. If you would have asked me going into the USC game, I had Michigan losing that game and going no better than 6-6. But we've seen that they can find ways to win. The defense is going to have to carry them at times, and at times the defense has full-on lapses, and they did against Minnesota without Will Johnson, without Josiah Stewart. Some of the same issues that we've seen, teams managing to just kind of shred the defense at times. My guy, Jayshawn Barham. I say my guy. I've never met him before. I still love him, regardless of his shortcomings. He's still struggling, but he's also made a couple plays. That's just kind of what he's going to give you. I actually had no problem with the late hit with him because it kind of sets the tone. But there were some things that went wrong in that game that make it feel and look a lot different. I don't think that fans were going to be really singing the praises of this team, even if they did win 24-3. Say that the teams just trade back and forth, 1-2-3 punt, 1-2-3 punt, instead of that fourth down, hands to the face, extending the drive. I think that things would have been kind of similar as far as the fan reaction. You have to keep in mind that Minnesota is better defensively than USC. USC is improved defensively, number 32 in the country. Minnesota is number 5 in the country. It's so they were able to take away those explosive plays, and they were able to kind of contain Michigan in ways that other teams weren't. Now, Washington has the number 10 defense in the country, so don't be surprised if it doesn't look a lot better. But at the same time, to me, this looked way better. The people calling for Kirk Campbell and all that stuff are like, Kirk doesn't know what he's doing, uncreative play calling. Did you watch the game? Did you look at what you were looking at? Because what I saw was a significantly improved play calling experience, a much different offense than what we even saw against USC, even though it, thematically is similar. But some of the things that they called were brilliant. But what I saw is kind of a reversion to kind of what we saw in weeks 1 and 2. Week 3 got a lot better offensively outside of the turnovers, right? They were able to kind of put some things together. All 11 are doing what they're supposed to do. But in this game, you kind of saw what you saw earlier in the season. 10 guys do something and one guy doesn't. And unfortunately, the one guy who doesn't is always the one where the play kind of falls apart. And I saw that a lot. There were some times where there was no gain. Sometimes there was a tackle for loss. Some of those Dono ones where Dono got the ball and he's tackled as soon as he basically gets it. You see the pass protection breaking down. I remember being it was somewhere in the third quarter. Alex Orji's running for his life, and behind me, I hear a bunch of people just yelling, "Throw it, throw it!" And it's like, well, that's what got Michigan into this mess in the first place. Was just to throw it. The reason why he's running wasn't because it was designed; it was because the pass protection broke down almost immediately. No receivers open, and Alex Orji takes it. But there's kind of a little bit of different things that are going wrong. 10 guys doing the right thing and one guy not doing it. Right? You've seen that quite a few times in this game. And some of these, if that 11th guy does the thing he's supposed to do, it's an explosive. And it just didn't happen that way. And that's unfortunately what you're going to get when you kind of essentially switch offenses midstream. Because it is more than just changing the quarterback, right? This is a completely different style of play. And you're seeing that in terms of the play calling. You're seeing that in terms of the lack of balance. And Jerome Moore is confident that they'll be able to find balance eventually, but you're just going to have to take it week by week, which is why I say that. Because they're going to eventually find something. I have talked a lot about the similarities to Alabama. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Michigan's going to be Alabama of last year. I don't think that's necessarily true. But you can kind of go through similar paces and have a similar trajectory if you are Michigan. In all of this. So let's continue along that train of thought. We'll get back to some of the Alabama comparisons. We'll talk more about the state of the offense. And we got a lot more coming. And I'll explain some other personal things here in a moment. But before we do that, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so why am I wearing glasses? Why am I, after we said we're going to have these shows out by drive time, 5 p.m., it's 6:12 at this moment, much later than I need it or want it to be. Why are all these things happening? Well, to enhance the video experience, it's going to take a little while before I was going to integrate this into the podcast as far as the video. And it wouldn't be me and the talking head. It was going to be more of some of the things that I can include, as well as like Tuesday press conference stuff. Well, I bought a gimbal for my main camera. Had one for my phone, but bought one for the main camera so that we could stabilize some footage and do some cool new things. That was the plan. I got it this morning at 10:40 a.m. It came a couple days early. Thankfully, came before Washington. And then so I took it to the press conference thinking like maybe I can figure out how to set this up, which I was very arrogant about it and I was incorrect. And I was like, maybe I can figure out how to set this up in time to use it for the press conference. I get it. And I tried to set it up and I couldn't do it. So I was like, okay. So I put it on the ground next to me and just go about the press conference as normal. Talk to Michigan's video guy, show him what I got. We talk about it and all that kind of stuff. Finish the press conference and everything is intact as far as I can recall. And I get home and I'm missing one of the key parts of the gimbal. And I realize that as soon as I get home and I'm like, what? So I message some people at Michigan, asked if they can find it. I said it would have been right over here. I don't know what happened because I remember when I talked to Michigan's video guy, I had all the parts and everything. And they're like, oh, we can't find it. And I was like, well, I'm coming down there to see if I can find it because trying to ship a new one. It said at that time it was going to be next week. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait that long. I want it for Washington for multiple reasons. And drive all the way down to Ann Arbor and then get stuck in traffic on the way back. How does that have anything to do with my glasses? Because I couldn't find it. I went to some camera stores. They didn't carry it. Thankfully, I was able to reorder the part and it's going to come tomorrow. For some reason, 3 hours ago, wasn't able to reorder the part and have it arrive early. And then I check again and suddenly, hey, we can get it to you by tomorrow. But I'm wearing my glasses strictly because I could not find them, but I found tons of things. I found things that I've been looking for like the last year, basically, including my glasses, while trying to find a different part that I have that it matches what what I just ordered, which I know exists somewhere, I think in this house. And I found all kinds of stuff. I found like 4 things that I've been looking for. So that is why I'm suddenly glass. Not because I feel like I need it. Actually, I don't feel like these do much for me anymore. I need a new prescription, but I was like, I'm going to wear them. And just because I haven't worn my glasses in forever. All right, let's get back to Michigan. Enough personal ridiculousness. So the state of the offense. Like I said, there's a lot that is working for it, even if it doesn't come with yardage and things of that nature. Alex Orji did make, I will say it was a mistake, but it was a dual mistake. Yeah, you can sit there and say Alex should have thrown to Donovan on the wheel route because he was wide open, and that's accurate. Colston was open at the time that he released it, but Colston became less open. And watching the replay, it didn't. I don't feel like they showed as good of a view on the TV replay as they did both my being able to see it being only 15 yards away from the action, mixed with the replay that they showed in stadium, which was the ball hit Colston's hands and then kind of bounced off his hands and went into the defender's hands. And so it was just kind of a bang play that was unfortunate. And you sit there and say, well, he put it in harm's way. Generally, that's a play that Colston would come down with. It's in the rain, though. Things kind of get a little bit different. But we saw a couple moments where Alex Orji was able to go through some progressions and either make the right read. Sometimes they went through progressions and he had to start running. There were foundational things that happen in this game that say, okay, this kid can figure it out. Now, pass protection needs to be better. The receivers need to be better. With Colston Loveland in, that certainly helped. The fact that he only came in for pass plays really showed that things were kind of telegraphed, and that's not exactly an ideal situation. You hope that he can, you don't want to get into a 2014 Michigan, Ohio State where it's like, well, we're going to have our running play quarterback and our passing play quarterback. You don't want that. That said, I mean, when Alex Orji came in, as a running play quarterback, he always had success until now he is leading the charge. It seemed like every time he'd run the ball, he was going to get 15 yards. I feel like Michigan does need to incorporate more of those designed runs. You saw Jalen Milroe doing that and having great success. I understand Alex Orji is not Jalen Milroe. He's like Jalen Milroe light, I think is the best way you can put it. I don't know that he's going to get to where Milroe is, but at the same time, Milroe wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire. Let's revisit Jalen Milroe in the past couple of years. So looking at his game log here, whoops, that's not what I want. He kind of did what Orji did before. He came in against Mercer and ran 7 times for 33 yards. He came in, this is 2021. Southern Miss 2 for 5 for 26, nothing crazy. In 2022, he kind of got the same deal until he played at Texas A&M, his first start. 17 for 83. I meant to look at the passing, so that's what we're going to look at. Didn't really attempt many passes before that. He was 3 for 7 in 2021. In 2022, he passed for 58.5%, 31 of 53. His first start was 12 for 19. Not much different than what Alex Orji was. 111 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. It's a little bit better, but even in 2022, it was kind of hit or miss. 14 of 27 for 255 against Texas, 51%, but had the yardage behind it. The week before, 13 for 18 against Middle Tennessee for 194. That it was his second best game of the entire season, according to passer rating. The next one came against Chattanooga, right? So he wasn't really lighting the world on fire. He did start getting to that 200-yard mark kind of regularly, though, last year. And then you look at what he was against Georgia, it was insane. 27 or 33 for 374 yards. That is Jalen Milroe's first or second ever 300-plus yard passing game. The only other one coming against Texas A&M last year. But in those games last year, Alabama wasn't really blowing out a lot of teams. They did blow out Middle Tennessee, but then close loss to Texas, close win again without Jalen Milroe against South Florida, relatively close win against Ole Miss, blowout win against Mississippi State, close win against unranked Texas A&M, close win over Arkansas, relatively close win over Tennessee, relatively close win over LSU, blowout win at Kentucky, blowout win against Chattanooga, close win against Auburn, close win against Georgia, close loss against Michigan. I bring all of that up because Michigan can get there. Alabama only had a handful of blowout wins last year. When you look at previous years, I'm looking at 2022. Blowout win Utah State, close win Texas, blowout win Louisiana Monroe, blowout win Vanderbilt, blowout win Arkansas, close win Texas A&M, close loss Tennessee, blowout win Mississippi State, close loss LSU. Yeah, you just kind of have to live with this a little bit while Michigan tries to kind of figure out what it can do. And it really is, in a lot of these plays, just really, it is a game of inches. There was one play, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was the Alex Orji keeper. This was a designed run, one of the few, where they sent Donovan and Kalel the other side. And Alex Orji has daylight if Marlon Klein keeps his block, but he doesn't. That's the type of thing, the guys keep their blocks. That's kind of either they whiff on their block or they miss their block. Or miss their block, or they don't hold it long enough. They're getting very close to getting some of those things going. Now, it's a little bit of a lack of discipline, but I think that they might get there. They might not. That's why I say take things game by game, because it's hard to sit there and say what's going to happen at the end of November compared to where it is now, because Michigan can improve. Or it could stay the same, or it could inexplicably get worse. But that's why you got to take things game by game. Reason why I use Alabama here is because Michigan can follow that same trajectory. Alabama was left for dead last year. At this time of year, no one was talking about Alabama as being a potential college football playoff team. we were talking about the end of an era, and it ended up being the end of an era, kind of, because Nick Saban ended up leaving. But at this time last year, everyone's like, what is wrong with Alabama? They got blown out by Texas. They're playing everyone close. Michigan at least was able to beat what looks to be an extremely good USC team. Now, that was at home. They're going to have a bigger test coming up on the road. They're going to be on the road for pretty much a month here. And they've got some hard teams to face. Let's continue along those lines of thoughts. Let's do that here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, you're going to want to get to, obviously, you're going to want to get to the ballpark to see the playoff Detroit Tigers. Plenty of concerts, great things coming up. Best way to get in the door is through Gametime. Now, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With things like the Super Deal, which I think is pretty great because they give you different tiers of deals and you just find just amazing things. They've got all these curated deals to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. And the seat views makes it so you know exactly what you're going to be looking at when you get to the game or the concert, whatever the event is. And the lowest price guarantee means that Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better deal elsewhere. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. So the conversations that I had with people who know what Michigan's trying to do inside and outside the building, not nearly as apocalyptic. They don't have as much of a dystopian view as a lot of you out in the regular fan base. I'm not trying to put sunshine and rainbows all over everything. I do think Michigan's in a better place than where it was under Davis Warren. Because as many of you say, hey, he was slinging it for about 110 yards. And then throwing 3 interceptions. Alex Orji did throw an interception, but he did put, it was a position where Colston could and should have come down with that. But again, weather, bang nature of it is what it is. Not nearly as gaudy of a rushing line, and that maybe feels alarming based off of what Iowa was able to do. But certainly game plans are game plans, and they're scholarship players on the other side. One of the things that should be noted is Michigan under Jim Harbaugh had closer games against worse teams, and y'all didn't melt down over it. 2015 is a prime example, and that was an example of a team that went from looking just kind of to looking a heck of a lot better, right? They, in the first half of the season, they lost to Utah and Michigan State, and I wouldn't say against teams with a pulse are the ones that they lost, because they did beat a ranked BYU, ranked Northwestern teams. They didn't end up finishing ranked, but at that time early in the season, they were looked at. But like when you look at kind of what the teams that they faced were in the time frame, they lost to the teams that had a pulse and beat the ones that didn't. But I think the good news was for that team is that they found ways to escape on the road at Minnesota. Injured Jake Rudock, Wilton Spate comes in, makes it happen. Indiana, they passed for 1,000,000 yards, but similarly, the defense fell apart in the second half, going up against tempo, and had to go to double overtime. Michigan ekes one out. Y'all weren't melting down then, and it's in large part because you were hopeful for the future. I think the expectations are a little bit different, obviously, because you're coming off of a national championship, which I think you should relish a little bit more with the understanding that, hey, you're probably not winning one this year, but maybe you can still make some noise, essentially. You can have some fun postseason matchups, potentially in the college football playoff if the cards align themselves right, and Michigan just figures out how to do enough. A lot of people say Michigan doesn't have a lot of talent. I disagree with that. It's just you don't have seasoned talent at the quarterback position. That doesn't mean he's not talented. We use Jalen Milroe as the example. People at this time last year would look at Jalen Milroe kind of a similar vein as what they look at Alex Orji at. Is like, he just can't quite get it together, but he's got all the talent in the world. It's kind of the same type of thing. I do think Milroe is a bit more talented, obviously, than Alex Orji. But that's not saying that you can't get something out of Alex Orji. I think Michigan needs to find a way to scheme receivers open. Now, they were without Samaj this last week, and that certainly hampers you at least a little bit with the horizontal game. I mean, even in the downfield, because Samaj has shown that he can be a downfield threat. You know, he had the touchdown against Texas. He had a touchdown last year, long one against Rutgers. And you just have to adjust your expectations to some degree. They're not moving away from Alex Orji, at least not now, right? You're at least going to get to the bye week and reassess. And chances of them changing again is unlikely, and I would say should be discouraged. Because if you suddenly say, okay, we got Jack Tuttle, he's healthy, let's change streams, you're basically switching the offense for a third time. Now, yes, reverting a little bit more back to what you had in weeks 1 through 3, but you kind of have to roll with what you've got. You can't change again for the sake of changing. I still think that making the move to Orji is what needed to happen. I'm not confident that Davis Warren doesn't turn the ball over multiple times in the last 2 weeks and that they win the last 2 games. Okay, so injury certainly played a part this last week. No Will Johnson, like I said, no Josiah Stewart. You just kind of were losing a bunch of guys. No Wes Walker. The depth got really thin at safety in particular, you know, but you got some great play. And here's some from some guys in the secondary. Even though, Amir Hall had his moments where he kind of he wasn't what you hoped he would be looking in the preseason based off of what he did in FCS level. Jair Hill, man, he's put together 2 really good games. Suddenly you're like, he's everything you hoped he could be. It didn't look that way against Texas, but that's a hard place to be when you are in your second ever start, really no playing time, and suddenly you're thrown to the wolves against one of the better offenses, best quarterbacks, really good receiver group. I think you got a little bit from a lot of these guys like Jair Hill, like TJ Guy. They continue to go down the rotation and find guys that are able to make some plays. I thought we saw some good things from Cam Brandt. I thought that the Ike Iwona continues to be pretty good, and that might not be on the same level as Kenneth and Mason, but at the same time, you need those guys down the stretch if you're going to contend for everything. So I think Michigan's in a good spot, even if it doesn't look like it. Now, I could be wrong and things could fall off a cliff. They could go to Washington, find themselves on the wrong end of a blowout situation, lose hope and faith, and then go from there. But so far, Michigan's found ways to win in games that you would think maybe could go the other way, right? Like, even though the second half hasn't been the Minter style, the second half shutdown, it's gone the other way. Second half teams climb back in it after Michigan has commanding leads. It's still, they find ways to hold on and win, and that's important. We've seen, bad Michigan teams squander leads back pre-Harbaugh for the most part, even in Harbaugh, South Carolina and the Outback Bowl. So I'm just advising patience. Take each game for what it's worth. They could lose to Washington and beat Oregon because that's the kind of team this is. We have yet to see them put together anything close to a complete game. And I know that a lot of you are probably sitting there saying, well, we're not sure that they can. But we know that a lot of these players have, and the coaches have shown that they are willing to change things up when things aren't going right. And now you got to trust the process because this is basically week 3 instead of week 6. And I think that they'll find a way to make it happen because we've seen a lot of really good things. It just needs to be consistent, right? It's not like we haven't seen it. We've seen good things happen. They just have to be consistent. They have the foundation there. So that's a good thing. All right, we're going to be back on Tuesday. We will continue to discuss Michigan's trajectory as we look forward to Washington. Wednesday, it'll be kind of more of the same. And then hopefully we'll do Trente on Thursday. I leave for Seattle on Thursday evening. And then we'll do a show in Seattle on Friday. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.